I clutched a simple brass key, and with it, I brought down his entire empire. Every punch Randall Pierce threw was another signature on his own confession. I just needed to unlock the right door. When I turned that key, my whole family stood watching. Either the truth would explode into the open, or we would shatter forever. The choice wasn't mine anymore. The evidence spoke louder than his fists ever could, and $42 million in stolen funds don't just disappear. They leave a trail that even a CFO can't erase. My name is Sloane Hart, and I never intended to move back home at 34. But after catching my ex with his assistant on what should have been our anniversary, I found myself standing in my childhood bedroom in Grafton Ridge, Colorado, surrounded by boxes and the suffocating weight of failure. "It's just temporary," Mom had promised, her voice bright with forced optimism. Bethany Hart could spin anything into gold, even her daughter's spectacular relationship implosion. "Until you get back on your feet." That was 3 months ago. Temporary had become permanent the moment Randall Pierce, my stepfather and CFO of Stonebrook Holdings, realized he could transform my presence into another opportunity for control. "Sloane's home," he'd announce at every dinner party, his voice dripping with false concern. "Taking some time to reassess her priorities." The pause always landed like a slap. Meanwhile, my half-brother Wyatt would smirk from across the room, secure in his $380,000 advisory position at Stonebrook, a role Randall had crafted specifically for his biological son's limited skill set. I'd built a solid career as a compliance specialist at Halcyon Ridge Capital, untangling complex financial regulations and ensuring our private equity deals stayed clean. But here, in this house, I was just the stepdaughter who couldn't keep a man or manage her life. The brass key arrived on a Tuesday, tucked inside a mahogany box of my grandfather's effects. Mom handed it to me after dinner, while Randall reviewed quarterly reports in his study. "Dad wanted you to have this," she said quietly. "He always said you inherited his eye for detail." My grandfather had founded Stonebrook Holdings 40 years ago, building it from a single processing plant into a food distribution empire. The key was small, worn smooth by decades of handling, with numbers etched along its edge. 119 NM 7734. "What does it open?" I asked. Mom shrugged. "I never knew. Just keep it safe, okay?" I should have noticed how Randall's shoulders tensed when he walked past, how his gaze locked onto the key before sliding away. But I was distracted by something else that week: anomalies in Halcyon Ridge's review of potential acquisition targets. $42 million had moved through a series of shell companies, all somehow connected to the food distribution sector. The transactions were clever, layered through multiple entities, but patterns emerged if you knew where to look, and I always knew where to look. "You're working too hard," Randall observed one evening, appearing in the kitchen as I spread financial documents across the breakfast bar. "Maybe it's time to consider a different department, something less stressful." "I like my job," I replied, not looking up from a suspicious invoice. "Of course you do." His hand landed heavy on my shoulder. "But sometimes change is good, healthy, even, why don't you give me that key your mother mentioned? I'll put it in the safe with the other family valuables." The casual request sent ice through my veins. "It's just an old key. Probably doesn't open anything anymore." "Still," his fingers tightened slightly, "better to keep it secure." That night, I examined the key more carefully. The numbers weren't random. They followed a pattern used by North Mesa Records, a climate-controlled storage facility that catered to law firms and financial institutions. My grandfather had been meticulous about documentation. Whatever this key opened, he'd wanted it preserved. At work, the shell company trail led to Waylake Supply LLC, a refrigerated transport company that existed only on paper. The invoices showed Stonebrook Holdings paying premium prices for ingredient deliveries that, according to GPS records, never left Stonebrook's own warehouses. The setup was elegant in its simplicity. Create fake purchases, route the money through Waylake, then redistribute it through a network of accounts controlled by... I stared at the signature on the authorization forms. Randall Pierce, with secondary approval from advisory consultant Wyatt Pierce. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Randall's moving your things to the basement storage. Says Wyatt needs the spare room for a home studio. Hope that's okay. I grabbed my laptop and the key, my hands shaking with a fury I hadn't felt since the day Randall first walked into our lives. All smooth words and calculated charm. He'd isolated me professionally, undermined me personally, and now he was literally pushing me into the basement. But he'd made one mistake. He'd let me see the key. And I was very good at opening doors that were meant to stay closed. The basement smelled like forgotten dreams and mildew. I stood among towers of boxes, my life literally relegated to storage, while upstairs, Wyatt's laughter echoed through what used to be my room. Mom helped me arrange things, her movements quick and nervous, avoiding my eyes. "It's just until you find your own place," she murmured, folding a sweater I'd left behind years ago. Wyatt's music production business is really taking off. Music production. That's what we were calling his podcast about cryptocurrency and pickup artistry now. But Wyatt had something I didn't: Randall's DNA and unwavering approval. "His advisory role at Stonebrook pays $380,000, I said quietly. "That should cover a nice studio rental somewhere." Mom's hands stilled. "Don't start, Sloan, not tonight." Family dinners became performance art. Randall would hold court at the head of the table, dissecting Wyatt's brilliant insights from board meetings while I pushed food around my plate. The Sunday after my relegation to the basement, he was particularly animated. "Wyatt's procurement optimization proposal could save us millions," Randall announced, raising his wine glass. "Sometimes fresh eyes see what experience misses." Fresh eyes. Wyatt had never worked in supply chain, finance, or any relevant field. His degree was in communications from a college best known for its parties, but he'd identified inefficiencies in vendor relationships that miraculously aligned with the Waylake supply contracts I'd been investigating. "That's wonderful," Mom chirped, her smile bright and empty. "Sloan, honey, you've been so quiet. How's your work going?" "Busy," I said. "Lots of due diligence on potential acquisitions, complex financial structures that need untangling." Randall's fork paused midway to his mouth. "Still digging through other people's books? Must be tedious. All those late nights, weekend work, can't be healthy." "I find it fascinating. Actually, amazing what people think they can hide in financial statements." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Wyatt glanced between us, confused but sensing the undercurrent. Mom rushed to fill the silence with chatter about her garden club. That night, I worked in the basement, mapping connections between Waylake and 17 other shell companies. The pattern was clear. Stonebrook would order premium ingredients. Waylake would deliver them at inflated prices. But the goods either never existed or were simply moved from one Stonebrook facility to another. The overpayments, averaging $2.3 million per month, disappeared into a web of offshore accounts. My phone rang at 2 a.m., an unknown number. "You're working late." Randall's voice was conversational, but I could hear the edge. "I noticed your car in the driveway. Thought you might be out with friends." "Just catching up on some analysis." "About those acquisition targets?" "Among other things." A long pause. "You know, Sloan, I've been thinking. There's an opening in our Phoenix office. Inventory management, less stress, better work-life balance. I could put in a word." Phoenix, 2,000 miles from Stonebrook's headquarters. From the evidence. "I'm happy where I am." "Are you?" His tone sharpened. "Living in your mother's basement, working yourself to death, alone? That doesn't sound like happiness to me." "Good night, Randall. Think about it. And Sloan, that key of your grandfather's, I really should secure it properly. Family heirlooms can get lost so easily." After he hung up, I sat in the dark, processing the threat beneath his words. He knew I was onto something. The key had triggered more than casual interest. It had activated something close to panic. I cross-referenced the numbers etched on the key with North Mesa Records' client database. a gray area search that my position at Halcyon Ridge technically allowed. Box 119, climate-controlled section NM, account 7734. The account was registered to a trust. Marcus Hart Legacy Preservation Fund. My grandfather. The next morning, I found my laptop moved, my papers reorganized, nothing missing. But the message was clear. Randall had been here. A sticky note on my monitor in Wyatt's handwriting. Dad says you should really consider Phoenix. I could use the studio space down here too. At the office, I pulled Stonebrook's vendor audit reports. Every Waylake transaction had been personally approved by Randall, with Wyatt's electronic signature as procurement consultant, appearing 6 months ago, precisely when the monthly amounts doubled. I thought about my grandfather, who'd built Stonebrook with calloused hands and ironclad ethics. He'd died when I was 12, but I remembered his stories about keeping one honest ledger, no matter what. Books don't lie, he'd say. Only the people writing them do. The key sat heavy in my pocket, its worn edges pressing against my palm. Whatever was in that storage unit, Randall feared it enough to show his hand. He'd moved too fast, pushed too hard, revealed too much. I had two choices. Take the Phoenix offer and let $42 million vanish into offshore accounts, or use the key and find out exactly what my grandfather had locked away. The decision was already made. I just needed to be smart about the execution. The garage smelled like motor oil and menace. I'd parked after another late night of tracing financial threads, my mind buzzing with connections between Waylake and a new cluster of shell companies. The automatic door was still grinding shut when Randall stepped from behind Mom's SUV. "We need to talk about boundaries," he said, blocking my path to the house. "It's midnight. Randall, this can wait." "No!" His hand shot out, palm flat against the wall beside me. "It can't. You're disrupting this family with your obsessions. Your mother's worried sick." "Mom's worried, or you're worried about what I'm finding?" His face darkened. "You have no idea what you're playing with. Give me the key." "What key?" "Don't." The word cracked like a whip. "I know you've been asking questions, making searches you shouldn't. That key belongs to Stonebrook Holdings, not to you." It was my grandfather's personal... His hand moved fast, the slap sharp and shocking. I stumbled back, hand flying to my cheek, tasting copper where my teeth cut the inside of my mouth. "The key," he said calmly, as if he hadn't just crossed a line we could never uncross. "Now." I straightened slowly, my face burning. "No." This time he shoved, hard. My shoulder hit the concrete wall, pain shooting down my arm, but I held his gaze, letting him see that he'd just made a critical error. Every controlling man thinks violence is power. They never realize it's evidence. "You're going to regret this," he whispered. "I already do," I said. "I regret not seeing what you were sooner." He left me there, trembling with rage and adrenaline. Inside, I heard Mom's voice, high and worried. "Is everything okay?" I heard, "Just a disagreement about her future." Randall's smooth response carried through the door. "You know how stubborn she can be." I sat in my car until my hands stopped shaking, then drove to the 24-hour urgent care on Maple Street. The intake nurse was professional, kind, trained to recognize the patterns. "I need to document injuries from an altercation," I said clearly. "Full photographic record, please." The bruises were already blooming. Cheek, shoulder, upper arm where he'd grabbed me. The doctor was thorough, noting each mark, taking photographs from multiple angles. The paperwork would create an official record, timestamps that couldn't be disputed. "Do you need resources?" the nurse asked quietly. "There are services." "I have resources," I assured her. "I just needed documentation." Back in the basement at 3 a.m., I made copies of everything. Medical records, photographs, the recording from my phone that had been running in my pocket. Audio wasn't perfect, but his threats were clear enough. I thought about calling Mom, showing her what her husband had done, but I knew how that story would go. Stress from work, misunderstanding. He didn't mean it. He's under so much pressure. The excuses would flow like water, and nothing would change except Randall would be more careful next time. No, the key wasn't just about financial crimes anymore. It was about leverage, the only currency Randall Pierce understood. I emailed the injury documentation to myself, to a lawyer friend from college, and to a sealed file at work that required two-factor authentication to access. Then I sat in the dark, planning my next move. The violence had been desperate, sloppy. Randall was scared. Whatever my grandfather had locked away threatened more than just a fraud scheme. It threatened the entire foundation of Randall's carefully constructed life. At dawn, I heard movement upstairs, Mom's soft footsteps, Randall's heavier tread. Normal morning sounds that felt like lies. I touched my swollen cheek, felt the deep ache in my shoulder, and made a decision. I would go to North Mesa Records today, not to hide or flee, but to arm myself with whatever truth my grandfather had preserved. Randall had drawn blood, thinking it would make me weak. He was about to learn that heart women didn't break. We just got more dangerous. I dressed carefully, choosing a blazer that would hide the shoulder bruising, applying concealer with practiced strokes. My reflection looked normal, professional. Only the eyes gave away the transformation, from victim to hunter. The brass key felt warm in my hand, its numbers catching the morning light. 199 NM 7734. Whatever waited in that storage unit, it had been worth my grandfather's security measures and Randall's violence. Time to find out why. I paused at the basement door, listening to breakfast sounds above. Wyatt's laugh, Mom's murmur, Randall's confident voice discussing the day's meetings. So normal, so performed. They had no idea that their perfect morning was built on 42 million stolen dollars and a woman they'd underestimated. But they would learn. I slipped out the back door, cradling my truth like a weapon. Sometimes the smallest key opens the biggest doors, and I was done letting anyone stand in my way. North Mesa Records sat like a fortress of secrets on the industrial edge of town, all climate control and biometric security. I arrived at opening time, my grandfather's key burning in my pocket alongside a notarized letter I'd found in his papers, 2 months before his death. To whom it may concern, it read in his precise handwriting, I hereby grant full access to storage unit 199 NM 7734 to any direct descendant who carries the corresponding key and demonstrates commitment to corporate ethical standards. The contents are to be used to preserve the integrity of Stonebrook Holdings against any who would corrupt its founding principles. The facility manager, a careful woman named Dolores, examined the letter with a magnifying glass. This is highly unusual. Most access transfers require death certificates, probate documents. My grandfather was thorough, I said. He included specific authentication protocols. She nodded slowly. The biometric phrase. He recorded it when he established the unit, said his heir would know it. I closed my eyes, hearing his voice across decades. What would he choose? Then it came, his favorite saying whenever someone questioned his success. Books don't lie. Only the people writing them do. Dolores smiled. Follow me. The storage unit was small, temperature-controlled, pristine. 3 filing boxes sat on metal shelves, each labeled by year, but it was the sealed envelope on top that drew my attention. Open only when the wolves circle. The wolves were certainly circling now. Inside the envelope, a handwritten note and a small device that looked like a primitive USB drive. My dear one, the note began. If you're reading this, then someone has betrayed what we built. The boxes contain my shadow accounting, every transaction I tracked when I suspected internal theft. But the real evidence is on this device. It requires hardware authentication. The key itself is the authenticator. Look closer at what you carry. I examined the brass key under the unit's bright light. What I'd taken for decorative etchings were actually micro USB contacts, concealed in an era before such things were common. My grandfather had hidden a UB module in plain sight. The first box revealed his meticulous tracking of pension fund discrepancies dating back 5 years before his death. Handwritten ledgers showed money moving in patterns I recognized. The same shell game Randall was playing now, but cruder, less sophisticated. Notes in the margins. CFO Turner, investigate, and board member Collins complicit? But Turner had died in a car accident 6 months before my grandfather's heart attack. Collins had retired suddenly, moving to Costa Rica. Coincidences that felt less coincidental with every page I turned. The second box held correspondence, letters expressing concern about financial irregularities, responses dismissing his worries, board meeting minutes where his motions for external audits were voted down, a pattern of systematic dismissal that would have frustrated a man who built his company on transparency. The third box was the goldmine, photocopies of invoices, shipping manifests, bank records. He'd tracked $8.7 million in false transactions over 18 months, all authorized by Turner with board approval from Collins and 2 others. But the scheme had been shut down abruptly, right after Turner's accident. I plugged the key into my laptop's USB port, holding my breath. The drive mounted, requesting biometric confirmation. The key's brass surface had a slight depression I'd never noticed, a fingerprint reader, decades ahead of its time. My thumbs settled into the groove. Bloodline confirmed appeared on screen, accessing Marcus Hart contingency files. The screen filled with data that made my coffee shop discoveries look like child's play. Spreadsheets, emails, recorded phone calls. My grandfather had built a comprehensive case, but something had stopped him from using it. The final file was a draft letter to the FBI, never sent. Then I found the connection that changed everything. A young analyst named Randall Pierce had been Turner's protege, consistently flagged in my grandfather's notes as ambitious but ethically flexible. After Turner's death, Pierce had led the reform effort that supposedly cleaned up the fraud. Except he hadn't cleaned it up. He'd refined it, made it invisible, and waited 20 years to implement version 2.0 with his son as the perfect accomplice. A new folder caught my eye. Life insurance policies. My grandfather had increased his coverage dramatically in his final year, adding riders about suspicious death, with me named as contingent beneficiary if the primary, my mother, was under duress or undue influence. My phone buzzed. Randall, where are you? Your mother is worried. Then another. We can discuss terms. Phoenix was just a suggestion. And finally, don't do anything you'll regret. I photographed every document, uploaded encrypted copies to 3 different cloud services, and carefully repacked the boxes. But I kept the USB key merged with its brass housing. My grandfather had given me more than evidence. He'd given me the proof that Stonebrook's corruption was a cancer that had metastasized twice, claiming him as its victim. Driving back, I felt the weight of inherited responsibility. My grandfather had tried to fight alone and lost, but he'd preserved his weapons for someone who would be smarter, more connected, more capable of wielding them. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was completing a mission that began before I was born, armed with evidence that would make Randall Pierce's empire crumble exactly as it deserved, one documented crime at a time. The law offices of Marin Astor occupied a converted Victorian in downtown Grafton Ridge, far from Stonebrook's glass towers. I chose her specifically, a labor attorney with a reputation for taking on corporate giants and winning. More importantly, she had no connections to Randall's network. This is comprehensive, Marin said after 2 hours of reviewing my evidence. Her reading glasses reflected the spreadsheets showing $42 million in fraudulent transfers. Both the historical pattern and the current scheme. Your grandfather was thorough. He was murdered for it, I said flatly. I can't prove it, but the timing isn't necessary to prove, she interrupted. Financial fraud at this scale, with these players, is enough, but we need to be strategic. Randall Pierce has resources, connections. A frontal assault would give him time to destroy evidence, intimidate witnesses. I laid out my 3-pronged plan, refined during the sleepless night after visiting North Mesa. Marin's expression shifted from professional interest to genuine admiration. Simultaneous strikes, she murmured. Corporate, legal, and public. It's brilliant. We spent the next 4 hours crafting documents. A whistleblower complaint for both Halcyon Ridge and Stonebrook's boards, scheduled for delivery Monday at 9 a.m., just before the quarterly budget meeting. Marin would file preservation orders to prevent evidence destruction. I'd already created offline backups, cryptographically hashed to prove authenticity. "What about your safety?" Marin asked, noting the careful way I moved my bruised shoulder. "Documented and filed," I assured her. "He won't try anything physical again. Too risky now." That evening, I found Mom in the garden, tending her roses with the focused intensity she reserved for avoiding difficult truths. The setting sun painted everything golden, deceptively peaceful. "Mom," I said softly, "we need to talk about Grandfather's letter." She stiffened but didn't turn. "What letter?" "The one about ethical standards at Stonebrook. The one he wrote before he died." Her pruning shears paused. "Your grandfather had strong opinions about many things. He had evidence, Mom, about the fraud, about what happened to Turner and Collins, about what Randall's doing now." She finally faced me, her expression carefully neutral. "Randall saved Stonebrook after your grandfather died. The company was in chaos. Because they murdered him." The words hung between us like a blade. Mom's face crumpled, then reformed into something harder. "You don't know that. His heart was fine until he started investigating $8 million in missing funds. Then Turner dies in a convenient accident. Grandfather has a sudden heart attack, and Randall emerges as the reformer who cleans everything up. Except he didn't clean it up. Mom, he perfected it." "Stop." Her voice was steel. "Just stop. Even if any of that were true. It's been 20 years. We have a life, a family, built on blood money and lies." She slapped me, different from Randall's calculated violence. This was pure emotion, decades of denial crystallizing into motion. We stared at each other, both shocked. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did," I said gently. "And I understand. But Monday morning, the truth comes out, all of it. You need to decide where you stand." I left her among the roses and found Randall in his study, reviewing contracts with Wyatt. They looked up as I entered, twin expressions of annoyance shifting to wariness. "Family meeting," I announced. "I wanted you to know I've completed my analysis of Stonebrook's vendor relationships." Randall's jaw tightened. "And?" "Waylake Supply is a masterpiece of financial engineering. $42 million over 18 months, layered through 17 shell companies, all leading back to accounts you and Wyatt control." I smiled at my half-brother. That $600,000 consulting fee last month was particularly bold. Wyatt started to speak, but Randall silenced him with a gesture. "Assuming any of that were true," Randall said carefully, "proving it would be—" "Already done." I pulled out my phone, showing him a photo of the USB key. "Grandfather left me everything. Turner's scheme, your involvement, the whole pattern, plus what I've documented myself. Forensic accounting is beautiful that way. Numbers don't lie." "What do you want?" His voice was flat, defeated. "Nothing. You can't buy this. Randall, Monday morning, Stonebrook's board gets everything. The authorities get their copies, and Halcyon Ridge learns why their due diligence kept finding red flags. You'll destroy the company, your mother's security." "My mother's security was destroyed the day you killed my grandfather." I stood. "She just doesn't know it yet." I paused at the door. "Oh, and Wyatt? Start updating your resume. That $380,000 advisory role is about to evaporate along with your father's career." The house was silent as I descended to the basement. Everything was in motion now, the mechanisms of justice grinding forward. I opened my laptop and set a final piece in place, an invitation to 2 independent board members and the lead partner at Raven & Cole, Stonebrook's external auditors. "Urgent matter regarding systematic fraud. Evidence presentation, Monday 9 a.m., conference room 28. Please bring your forensic team." The trap was set. All that remained was watching it spring. Monday arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that makes lies impossible to maintain. Conference Room 28 occupied the southwest corner of Stonebrook's executive floor, its glass walls offering a view of the Rockies that Randall had always said inspired vision and transparency. He was about to learn what transparency really meant. I arrived at 8:45, my evidence organized in leather portfolios, the brass key in my jacket pocket. The independent board members, Patricia Huang and David Okoro, were already there with Raven and Cole's senior forensic team. Their expressions suggested they'd cleared their schedules after receiving my documentation preview. "Ms. Hart," Patricia nodded. "Your preliminary findings were concerning." "Wait until you see the full picture," I replied, connecting my laptop to the presentation system. Randall entered at 8:58, Wyatt trailing behind like a sullen shadow. They'd come prepared for damage control. I could see it in Randall's calculated calm, the way his eyes swept the room to assess threats. His face tightened when he saw the Raven and Cole team. "I wasn't aware we'd scheduled an audit review," he said smoothly. "We haven't," David Okoro replied. "This is an ethics investigation based on whistleblower allegations." General Counsel Margaret Chen entered, followed by CFO James Wright, one of the few executives I knew to be clean. The room filled with electric tension. "Let's begin," I said, standing at the presentation screen. 22 years ago, Stonebrook Holdings experienced its first major fraud scheme. $8.7 million disappeared through false vendor payments. The investigation ended when CFO Turner died in a car accident, and my grandfather, Marcus Hart, suffered a fatal heart attack while preparing evidence for the FBI. I clicked to the first slide, my grandfather's handwritten ledgers. The fraud was supposedly resolved by a young analyst named Randall Pierce, who identified the issues and implemented new controls. What actually happened was far different. The next slides showed the pattern, how the old scheme's structure matched the current one, evolved and refined. Murmurs rippled through the room as I laid out the Waylake Supply Network, each shell company mapped to offshore accounts. Over the past 18 months, I continued, $42 million have been systematically stolen from Stonebrook Holdings through fraudulent vendor payments authorized by CFO Randall Pierce and advisory consultant Wyatt Pierce. "This is ridiculous," Wyatt burst out. "You can't just—" "Let her finish," Patricia commanded. I pulled out the brass key, holding it up. My grandfather knew he was in danger. He preserved his evidence and hid the access method in plain sight. This key isn't just a key. It's a hardware authentication device. I inserted it into the laptop's USB port, the screen filled with my grandfather's files, emails, recorded conversations, the forensic accounting that proved Turner and Randall had worked together. "But the real evidence," I said, clicking to the current data, "is what's happening now." The Raven and Cole team leaned forward as I walked through each transaction, purchase orders for ingredients that went to empty warehouses, shipping manifests for trucks that never moved, invoices paid to companies that existed only on paper. "Mr. Pierce," the lead auditor said quietly, "these authorizations have your digital signature." Randall's composure finally cracked. "Those could be forged." "They're authenticated through Stonebrook's internal blockchain," I interrupted. "Time-stamped, IP verified, with your biometric login. Wyatt's are even easier. He used the same password for everything. GetRich2023. Nervous laughter rippled through the room. Wyatt's face flushed crimson. I clicked to the final slide. The money trail. The funds route through 17 shells before reaching accounts in the Cayman Islands. Account signatories, Randall Pierce, Wyatt Pierce, and 3 individuals who supposedly manage Waylake Supply but actually work for Pierce Financial Consulting, Randall's side business. "Motion to suspend both individuals pending investigation," Patricia announced. "Seconded," David added immediately. "You can't," Randall started forward, then stopped as building security entered. Margaret Chen had texted them the moment I'd shown the authenticated signatures. "Mr. Pierce," Margaret said formally, "your access to all Stonebrook systems is suspended immediately. Security will escort you to collect personal items. Randall's eyes found mine across the table. For a moment, I saw the real man, not the polished executive or controlling stepfather, but the desperate criminal who'd killed to keep his secrets. "You destroyed your own mother's life," he hissed. "No," I said calmly. "You did that 22 years ago. I just opened the door to let the truth out." As security led them away, Wyatt whimpering about lawyers and misunderstandings, Patricia turned to me. "The board will need interim leadership for compliance and audit remediation. Would you consider—" "I'll do it," I said. "For my grandfather and for every employee whose pension you were stealing." James Wright spoke for the first time. "The pension fund. How bad is it?" I pulled up one final file. 26.7 million in unfunded liabilities. But if we move fast, freeze the offshore accounts, pursue clawbacks, we can recover most of it. The room erupted in activity. Phones calling FBI contacts, laptops opening to freeze accounts, the machinery of justice finally grinding into gear. Through the glass walls, I watched Stonebrook employees gathering, sensing that something momentous was happening. I touched the brass key in my pocket, thinking of my grandfather. He'd fought this battle and lost, but he'd made sure someone could finish it. The door he'd wanted opened was never just about a storage unit. It was about the truth, and now, finally, it was wide open for everyone to see. The silence after security removed them lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then Randall lunged. He broke free from the guard's grip with desperate strength, rushing toward the presentation laptop, toward the evidence that would end him. His hand reached for the brass key still jutting from the USB port. "Stop him!" Patricia shouted. 2 security officers intercepted Randall before he could reach the table, wrestling him back as he struggled wildly. The room erupted in chaos, chairs scraping, people backing away. Margaret Chen already on the phone with building security for backup. "That's mine!" Randall roared, his polished executive mask completely shattered. "The key belongs to Stonebrook, to me." "Actually," I said, my voice cutting through the commotion with icy clarity, "it belonged to Marcus Hart, and he left it to someone who would use it properly." The lead auditor from Raven & Cole was furiously typing on his laptop. "I'm seeing real-time attempts to access the offshore accounts. Someone's trying to move the money." "Cut them off," David Okoro ordered. "Full freeze, immediately." "Already done," the auditor confirmed. "But there's activity from a secondary authorization. Someone else has access." Wyatt, who'd been cowering near the door, suddenly made his own move, not toward the evidence, but toward the exit. He'd realized his father's game was over and was trying to run. "Security, detain Mr. Wyatt Pierce as well," Margaret commanded. "No one leaves until the authorities arrive." "You don't understand," Randall said, his voice dropping to something more dangerous as the guards held him. "I saved this company after Turner died, after Marcus had his accident. I cleaned up their mess. I deserve—" "You deserve prison," Patricia interrupted, "and that's exactly where you're going." The general counsel's phone buzzed. "State Financial Crimes Unit is en route. FBI White Collar Division has been notified. They're very interested in the interstate commerce aspects." I unplugged the brass key, holding it up one final time. "Every transaction you made is recorded here. Every offshore transfer, every shell company and corporation. My grandfather suspected you were Turner's accomplice, not his reformer. He just needed more time to prove it." "Time I made sure he didn't have," Randall snarled, then caught himself. The room went still. Margaret Chen stepped forward. "Mr. Pierce, are you confessing to—" "I'm not confessing to anything," he backpedaled quickly. "Marcus was old, weak heart. The stress of finding out about Turner—" "Is being recorded," Margaret noted, gesturing to the conference room's security cameras. "Everything said in this room is admissible evidence." Through the glass walls, I could see Stonebrook employees gathering in clusters, phones out, the news spreading like wildfire through the building. Someone had already updated the company's internal social network. Pierce suspended, Fraud investigation. FBI coming. The elevator dinged, and more security arrived, followed by 2 detectives from the Financial Crimes Unit. They took in the scene. Randall restrained, Wyatt trying to shrink into the corner, the Raven and Cole team guarding laptops full of evidence. "Who's the whistleblower?" the lead detective asked. "I am," I stepped forward, offering my hand. "Sloan Hart. I have documented evidence of $42 million in fraud over 18 months, connections to a similar scheme from 22 years ago, and—" I glanced at Randall. "A recorded implied confession regarding my grandfather's death." The detective's eyes sharpened. "We'll need everything. Chain of custody starts now." The next hour blurred into a controlled chaos of evidence transfer, preliminary statements, and formal arrests. Randall and Wyatt were led out in handcuffs as hundreds of Stonebrook employees watched from cubicles and doorways. Someone started a slow clap that built into thunderous applause, not for the spectacle, but for justice finally served. As the authorities processed the scene, Patricia Huang approached me. "The board will meet in emergency session within the hour. We need someone who understands this mess to help us clean it up. The interim compliance position—" "I'll take it," I confirmed. "But I want full authority to review every transaction from the last 22 years. My grandfather's ghost deserves that much." "Done." She paused. "Your grandfather would be proud. You finished what he started." I looked out at the mountains, their peaks catching the morning sun. Somewhere in those heights, Marcus Hart's spirit could finally rest. The door he'd wanted opened hadn't just revealed fraud, it had exposed a murder, saved a company, and protected thousands of employee pensions. The brass key weighed nothing in my hand, but it had toppled an empire built on lies. Every punch Randall had thrown, every attempt to diminish me, every manipulation had only strengthened my resolve to see this through. The conference room door opened. Mom stood there, her face pale but composed. Our eyes met across the chaos of investigators and auditors. "Is it true?" she asked quietly. "About Dad? About what Randall did?" I crossed to her, pulling up the confession recording on my phone. Let her hear it from Randall's own mouth. The implications, the guilt, the 22 years of deception she'd shared a bed with. When it finished, she stood straighter. "I'll testify," she said simply. "Whatever you need, whatever Dad would have wanted." It was the first honest thing she'd said about Randall in years. The investigation would take months, the trials, probably years. But in this moment, watching the sun paint Stonebrook's headquarters gold while truth finally saw daylight, I felt the satisfaction of a door that could never be closed again. Some keys unlock rooms, others unlock justice. Mine had unlocked both. 6 months later, I stood in the same conference room where Randall's empire had crumbled. But now, instead of forensic auditors and FBI agents, it hosted Stonebrook's annual shareholder meeting. The company had survived, bloodied but not broken, cleaner than it had been in decades. "The pension fund has been fully restored," I announced to the packed room. "Through asset recovery and prosecution settlements, we've recouped $38 million of the $42 million stolen. The remaining gap was covered by insurance and a voluntary executive compensation reduction." Applause filled the space, in the front row. Mom sat between Patricia Huang and David Okoro, wearing the same pearl necklace she'd worn to my grandfather's funeral. She'd testified in both trials, her quiet dignity on the stand helping secure convictions that sent Randall away for 18 years and Wyatt for 7. "More importantly," I continued, "we've implemented the ethical framework my grandfather drafted but never got to institute. Every transaction now requires triple verification. Our compliance department has expanded from 3 people to 15, and we've established the Marcus Hart Integrity Award for employees who demonstrate exceptional ethical leadership." After the meeting, I found myself alone in the office that had once been Randall's. I'd refused to take it initially, but the board insisted. Now it served as a daily reminder of how power should be wielded, transparently, honestly, and always in service of others. My phone buzzed, a text from Marin Astor. "Saw the news coverage. Your grandfather's looking down and smiling. Dinner Thursday to celebrate? I smiled, typing back a yes. In the months since the investigation, I'd built a new life on foundations of truth rather than silence. The basement storage had been replaced with a downtown apartment. The cowering stepdaughter had become a respected executive. The family built on lies had fractured, but Mom and I were slowly constructing something genuine from the pieces. A knock interrupted my thoughts. James Wright entered, carrying a small box. "This came from the FBI," he said. "Evidence they're returning post-trial." Inside, wrapped in evidence tape I was authorized to break, lay the brass key. I lifted it carefully, feeling its familiar weight. Such a small thing to have changed so many lives. "What will you do with it?" James asked. I walked to the window, looking out at the mountains my grandfather had loved. "I think I'll have it mounted, maybe with a plaque. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again." "Poetic," he smiled. "Marcus would have liked that." That evening, I drove to Mountain View Cemetery. My grandfather's headstone stood solid against the setting sun, the inscription still sharp. Marcus Hart, builder of dreams, keeper of truth. I placed the key on the grass beside the stone. "We did it," I whispered. "It took 22 years and cost us both so much. But we did it. Stonebrook is clean. The thieves are in prison, and your ethics charter is finally law." Wind rustled through the pines, and for a moment, I could almost hear his voice. "Books don't lie. Sloan, only the people writing them do." "I know, Grandpa," I said. "That's why I'll keep reading them. That's why I'll keep watching. That's why your key will hang in my office. A reminder that truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deep someone tries to bury it." I stood to leave, then turned back one more time. "Oh, and Randall's prison job? Kitchen duty. He spends his days taking inventory of supplies that actually exist, for meals that actually get served. I thought you'd appreciate the irony." The drive home took me past Stonebrook's headquarters, its lights blazing against the darkening sky. Employees were leaving for the day, heading to families and lives made more secure by the pension funds we'd protected. Each of them represented a victory my grandfather would have celebrated. My phone rang. Halcyon Ridge's managing partner. "Sloan, I know you're committed to Stonebrook through the restructuring, but when you're ready, we want you back. Senior partner, Financial Crimes Division. You've proven you can spot what others miss, and more importantly, that you'll act on it." "Let me finish what I started here," I said. "Then we'll talk." Because that was the real lesson of the brass key. Some doors you open because you have to, others because you choose to. But once you've walked through, once you've seen what lies on the other side, you can never pretend the darkness doesn't exist. You can only keep shining light into it, one key turn at a time. The brass key sat on my dash, catching the last rays of sun. Tomorrow it would be mounted in my office, a monument to the man who died for truth and the woman who'd finally delivered it. But tonight, it was just a grandfather's gift to his granddaughter, a small key that had opened the biggest door of all, the one between silence and justice. And that door would never close again. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect across the miles. If this story of justice and family truth resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done with that brass key? Your stories and perspectives make our community richer.